Greetings ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my XCom free story video. If like me, you guys have recently been enjoying but struggling your way through the Long War 2 mod, your minds may have wondered to what the future of the XCOM franchise holds. I pondered the same thing, and so I thought I'd put together this video to explore some of the possible future story threads for XCOM 3. To begin with, I thought we'd first have to go back and see where we've come from.
In light of the recent extraterrestrial incursion, this Council of Nations has convened to approve the activation of the XCom project. You have been chosen to lead this initiative, to oversee our first and last line of defense. Your efforts will have considerable influence on this planet's future. We urge you to keep that in mind as you proceed. Good luck, Commander.
So, the cabal of aliens, a sort of variety of different alien species, all invade Earth, led by the Ethereals. They fight us, we start XCOM. XCOM begins to deploy squads to defeat the alien threat. We believe we do, we drive them back, we destroy their mothership, we kill the head Ethereal, and we believe the day is saved as we run our operations out of our command headquarters in our built base. Commander thinks he runs a thoroughly efficient campaign. His soldiers start to get better weapons, better tools, better armor, and at the end of the day, we believe we've won. Then XCOM 2 comes in, and lo and behold, we were in a status chamber all along. The aliens have taken over the Earth. They've had an army of these kind of hybrid soldiers, of mechs, and of the original aliens who have been amped up with human DNA. Now, what we learn in the sort of story of XCOM 1 about the aliens was that all the other alien species are essentially the Ethereals' end of experimental results on them, changing their DNA, making them useful soldiers for the cause of the Ethereals, whatever that might be. In XCOM 2, we learned the Ethereals are in fact a dying species. They're dying out, and they're searching the galaxy for a cure. And they're hoping to find a cure in the DNA of these species they conquer and then experiment on. Then they arrive on Earth, and the reason they stay so long is they actually think they found it. They think they found a cure, and they're just working on a way to do it. Enter the Avatar Project. So just to remind you guys, I'm sure many of you know this already, but the Avatar Project then is a way of building by liquefying human beings. I'm not sure how the science of that works, but you liquefy human beings and you manage to build yourself up an avatar, which is a kind of enhanced human hybrid that has vast psionic capabilities. And these are the bodies that the Ethereals want to essentially transplant their consciousness into in order to survive the thing that is killing them. So the aim in XCOM 2 eventually becomes, once you discover all this, to finish that Avatar project, to stop them being able to do it, to stop them liquefying humanity and committing genocide on a huge scale in order to build themselves new bodies. So that brings us along to the point. So in XCOM 2, you get to the point where you finally found the Avatar project, you think you've defeated the aliens as far as you can, you've learned all the intel, and you launch the assault. And let's just remind ourselves of what happens at the end of XCOM 2.
Without the Elders stabilizing the psionic network, everything's going haywire. That gate's not gonna hold much longer.
You heard her! Move! Shen, tell me you've got a plan B here. Nice work.
Wasn't anything on my end. This shouldn't even be possible. Unless...
Commander, whatever it is you're doing, it's working. Just make sure you save enough juice for your own trip home. Commander, you okay? We just lost contact. What the hell is happening here, Doctor?
It's the Elders. They're overwhelming our link, enveloping the Commander's consciousness.
Then sever the connection!
we do that, we risk a complete overload.
We will reclaim what was given. We will be whole once more. No! Your victory here means the end for all others. It will follow you as it followed us. You are not ready. We must not fail.
Vital stabilizing. Synaptic activity returning to acceptable levels.
And one transdimensional psionic network down for the count.
Mission accomplished, Commander.
This is the Liberation Network broadcasting on all frequencies. Advent is in full retreat across all areas.
Heavy fighting continues in the city's centers as Advent forces attempt to regroup.
We're barely keeping up with the flood of refugees here, as people continue to desert the Advent-controlled city centers.
Full curfew remains in effect as the administration deals with the ongoing crisis. To all of you in the occupied zones, hold your ground. Continue the fight. We promise you, help is on the way.
So guys, as many of you may already know, up to this point, that little bit at the end with the glowing sort of purple psionic energy emanating from the sea floor seems to hint heavily at a piece of XCOM history. Now, XCOM Enemy Unknown, as shown earlier in the video, was not the first XCOM series, as some of you may or may not know. So XCOM was a series that originally launched in the mid-90s, and this, what we're experiencing now, is we're going through sort of the second iteration of the franchise, a reboot, if you will. Now, in the 1990s version, XCOM Enemy Unknown was the first one, and the second one was a game called Terror from the Deep. The idea being that at the end of XCOM Enemy Unknown, the older version, the mid-90s version, a pulse was sent out when the aliens were defeated, and this pulse awoke a dormant alien threat from deep below the ocean. The team at Firaxis obviously have a lot of reverence for the old XCOM franchise, so a lot of people have jumped to the conclusion that what we're going to get is XCOM Terror from the Deep as the sequel to XCOM 2. I would argue that, yes, this is kind of the original cover and the micropost strategy with the developers of the game, and you did get new things. Like, you got completely different enemies, like Gillman, the Lobster Man, the Deep One, and who can forget the Aquatoid, obviously a reskin kind of sectoid. And they do look hilarious. And it is an opportunity that XCOM 2 used sort of rolling back time as the opportunity to do this, as an opportunity to develop new tech and new armors and things like that. But back in the original one, this is the sort of solution they came up with to bring new things to the game and new ideas and new enemies, maybe, and new weapons and new armor. So you can see why they did it. But my biggest problem with this is you get this and you get some new tech, you get the magnetic ion armor, stuff like that, plastic ion armor, everything to allow underwater combat to happen. Now, I get why they did it, as I said, but at its core, my biggest gripe with everyone assuming this is going to be the next full sequel from XCOM is it's all just a little bit silly. Now, I have faith in Firaxis. I can have faith they can make things look cool, but in XCOM Terror from the Deep, you could use things like grenades underwater, and it just made no sense. And everyone kind of moved around just like they did when they were on land. It was all just a little bit weird, and they obviously didn't have the tech at the time to do sort of the full idea of sort of swimming through the ocean as you battle aliens. As I said, I completely get why they did it, because they needed a new environment to create the need for the humans to develop new technologies and to go through a new tech tree and to maybe expose them to new different kinds of aliens. On the surface of it, it's all just a bit silly. So you may ask, if I don't think that Terror from the Deep is the direction they are going for the next XCOM, then what are they doing? Now, I'm going to sort of pull back a bit here and say, I don't think it's the direction for the next XCOM, XCOM 3, but I think they will pay an homage to Terror from the Deep in the expansion. Let's not forget that Enemy Unknown had the expansion Enemy Within, and I genuinely believe that Firaxis have been working on an expansion for XCOM 2, and I think there's very good chance that Terror from the Deep and some form of underwater combat might be it. Because as with Enemy Within to Enemy Unknown, all Enemy Within did was add an extra layer to the game overall. Now, I could very much see them integrating some kind of underwater combat as an extra layer into XCOM 2. While I don't think the concept of deep water fighting is serious or interesting or can be taken seriously enough for a full title on its own, like I don't think you can do a full game around having battles underwater. What you can do is you can have that as a landscape option, as a place you can hold other missions. So I would love to see an expansion where you're playing through sort of the XCOM campaign and there are missions where you have to go underwater. And to do that, you have to develop sort of a separate tech tree, and you maybe encounter differently engineered versions of the aliens you fight on the surface. Because let's not forget, the Ethereals, as spelled out in Enemy Unknown, have been tampering genetically with the aliens you fight. That's not their original forms. So it's within reason to think that the Ethereals could tamper with the DNA of the aliens they use as soldiers to have a kind of underwater form as well. It wouldn't be beyond the realm. So I could really love to play, because I would like to play some underwater missions. I just don't want a whole game based around it. I think it would just be a silly game. It would take me out of it. All the aspects of XCOM I enjoy, I think, would just be trivialized. I'd be going like, how did they get in a grenade to explode underwater? Why are they all just walking along the bottom like it's normal terrain? And get beyond all that silliness. If you just had a little bit of exposure to it, a little bit of tech, a few specialized weapons, and a few specialized templates, level templates, where you do have randomly generated underwater terrain, I think that would be amazing. And it would be a great homage to the original without asking that slightly weak concept to carry a full game on its own. My other backup for the concept of Terror from the Deep being an expansion is that Valen, and now Valen featured quite heavily in the XCOM 2 Resurrection book, which was a narrative prequel to the XCOM 2 games. Now, I think at the end of this book, Valen escapes on a ship. So the concept is that Valen's out there on the ocean somewhere, doing her bit, one presumes, for the effort. We don't know what. We never make contact with her in XCOM 2, at least not yet, not without the expansion. And with Valen being so closely tied in to the Bosses DLC, I can't see that sort of open-ended question not being resolved before XCOM 3. I think we go into XCOM 3 with Valen by our side, which goes to my theory that this will be part of the expansion. We'll fight some underwater battles. We'll maybe be with Valen, or alternatively, even Valen, the concept of the expansion might be that we're working for a team under Valen, and we're doing underwater operations for her, and it's kind of a completely separate side story to the XCOM 2 campaign. I think that would also be a really cool idea. Although I call the notion of Terror of the Deep silly, there could still be some fantastic things. Now, I don't think you should have an entire game when you're starting from scratch tech doing it, as I mentioned earlier, but I have faith in Fireaxis, and I have faith that they could make underwater battles pretty cool. And here's just like an artist's impression of what sort of XCOM Terror from the Deep might look like in Fireaxis' hands, with these sort of heavy-weighted suits of armor and taking the battle to the guys underwater. I think it would make a fantastic expansion, as I said already, but don't want to see it in the XCOM, don't want to see it as an entirely separate game. You may ask, where we'll be fighting? If we're not fighting underwater, what are we going to be doing? We can't just have another game where we fight in cities and maybe fight in their ships. That would be a bit dull. And you're right. So the first area I'm going to draw attention to is that during XCOM Enemy Unknown in the 90s version, there was very famous last mission called the Cydonia missions. There was two of them, in fact. It was sort of a two-parter finale. And this is when the sort of XCOM realizes that the alien base is on Mars, and they send their Avenger up there, and they send the team up there to deal once and for all with the alien threat. That never happened in the modern version of XCOM Enemy Unknown. We have not gone into space yet. We have not fought on a different planet. That just hasn't happened. So I think XCOM 3 that maybe opens with the Cydonia landing, I think would be a great place to start. So you're starting at the point, you're going in space, you're taking them on. The idea is maybe we're on the offensive. It's time for us to take the fight to them. Let's find out where their home planet is, see if we can get there, see if we can use their own tech to maybe take them on an alien world, or alien worlds, a variety of different alien worlds, and fight them on there. Sort of take their bases sort of place by place, and then sort of move forward, sort of shrink their perimeter till we finally get to their home planet, where the small XCOM squad has to do an infiltration mission to, I don't know, maybe shut down their shield defense or something like that. Let's go all Star Wars with it. Why not? Small team gets sent in, shuts down their shield defense. That's the kind of direction I'd love to see the game go. But I think, or at least the idea of it. Now, we have to set our minds back to the ending of XCOM 2. Now, at the end of XCOM 2, we need to remember what the Ethereals said to us. And they said, your victory here means an end for all others. It will follow you as it follows us. Now, this hints at maybe a kind of big bad lurking behind the scenes. Something that's scared the Ethereals to the point where they've had to look for alternative sources, look for ways to power themselves, look for ways to change themselves, maybe even cause the disease that's killing them by genetically manipulating their own DNA in order to fight off this as of yet unknown threat. So what could this threat be? Well, let's delve even deeper into the old XCOM franchise and go to the third game of that franchise, which was XCOM Apocalypse. Now, XCOM Apocalypse looked at the idea that at the end of Terror from the Deep, at least their version of it, you do manage to beat the sea aliens, but it causes an ecological disaster that essentially completely devastates the world ecosystems, and all of humanity has to take shelter in these megacities, these self-sustaining megacities. And in XCOM Apocalypse, you're sort of playing as a corporation, and there's different corporations in the city, and there's also aliens involved as well. It's all very complicated and sort of very involved. And I think even in interviews they've given about XCOM Apocalypse, they admit they maybe overshot that one in terms of the ambition of the project and what they managed to deliver. So anyway, that again was an opportunity to develop sort of new weapons, new tech. You face new enemies like the Cymorph. You got new armors, new weapons like the Megapole autocannon, which I think is a hand pistol. It looks great. But in this game, essentially, you eventually discover that the big bad behind all of this, behind all of these sort of aliens that now come and attack you after you've dealt with the aliens of the first game and a different race of aliens from the second game, this third race of aliens are all being controlled by something called the Micronoid. Now, the Micronoid is essentially a microscopic life form that lives in the bloodstreams of all the other aliens and controls their minds and their actions. Now, this could be a great big bad that you have to play against. The big bad that the Ethereals have been running from, and the big bad that we have to watch out for, that they don't think we can defeat, that we're not strong enough, we're not ready to take on the threat of these Micronoids. And now that brings up the possibility of, if XCOM 3 is like maybe starting out with us going and taking the fight to the aliens, but then, very cliched, but follow with me on this one, and it might be an interesting story just to see how it works and how maybe squads could be made up. But obviously, with a new big bad threat, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. We maybe team up with the Ethereals and their little squad of aliens, and we form sort of mixed human and alien squads. Now, I think that might be shooting for maybe even the end of XCOM 3, XCOM 4 territory, where XCOM 3 is us just taking the fight to the aliens and maybe fighting them back to the point where the Micronoids suddenly come out, then we're in trouble, we're stretched, we're fighting a war on two fronts, and eventually maybe we have to team up with them. So I think that throughout the XCOM 2, they're hinting at a bigger threat is going to end up to be these Micronoids, and these Micronoids inhabiting sort of aliens we haven't seen before. So it'd be new enemies and sort of new, very different situations. So that's my theory on where XCOM 3 is going to go. I think it will be us initially trying to take the fight to the Ethereals in space on alien planets in different terrains, and then the Micronoids making an emergence, and they're multi-dimensional microscopic beings as well. So we've been introduced to the concept of interdimensional travel with the gates in XCOM 2. So it makes sense that that part of the story, that part of the narrative gets expanded out, and the Micronoids start to open up portals into our reality, into our dimension, and start to send their extra-dimensional aliens, which they've drawn from a multitude of different dimensions, against us and against the Ethereals. And I think it'd be quite interesting at the sort of in XCOM 3 to have squads made up not just of humans. I think that would be quite cool. Like maybe get to know a sectoid called Bill who joins us on the mission. He becomes like our best psyker, or one of the great flyers they have, or anything, or even an Ethereal on the team eventually who sort of comes along and helps us out. I think that would add a really interesting and very different element for XCOM 3, very different from what they did in XCOM 2, just as XCOM 2 was very different from the first game. So that's my theory on where XCOM 3 is going. Let me know what you guys think of my ideas, if you agree with me. If you just think it's as simple as they hinted Terror of the Deep, XCOM 3 is definitely going to be Terror of the Deep. Or if you think that maybe Terror of the Deep will just be their next expansion, because I think they will release an expansion, probably before the end of this financial year, if I'm honest. Enemy Within came out about a year after Enemy Unknown. It's been just about over a year, I think, at this point, since XCOM 2 came out. And I see them, and not to play sort of the corporate stooge, but I see them wanting to release it before the end of the financial year, which is March, for those of you who don't know. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see an expansion in March. I would love it if it was a Terror of the Deep expansion, and then the franchise kind of moved on into space for XCOM 3. I think that's really the way I'd love to see the story go. Just let me know what you think. Let me know what you guys think of this video. If you like it, do drop a like. If you want to hear sort of more of my takes on video game narratives and where they might be going, do subscribe. And thanks very much for listening, guys. If you don't like the video, do let me know what you didn't like and what you don't agree with, and let's open up a discussion about what XCOM 3 might be about. Thanks very much for listening, and hope you have a great day.